Hello and welcome to another episode of AOS Shorts. Today is another episode in the Masterclass series, a series of interviews with top-tier competitive gamers about top-tier competitive match play Age of Sigmar. So today I'm joined by Andrew Standiferd, who is the two-time recent Las Vegas Open champion and a very strong US match play gamer. Andrew and I discuss all things Stormcast at the moment. We also discuss the current tournament scene and the meta, these sorts of lists that you can expect in a post-Maggotkin death and Daughters of Cain world. This show was recorded just in the lead up to AdeptCon, so is before we sort of got Deepkin. So that will need to be taken into account, but otherwise I think it's a great reflection on where things are at the top end of the tournament scene. So Andrew gives you his perspectives on that and also a number of tips, tricks and ways of improving your play at tournaments. So all in all, a really great show. While we're at the outset and before we get into the interview, just a couple of comments. On aosshorts.com, you'll find a tournament list archive with all of the top lists at the major two-day Age of Sigmar tournament events around the world. And there is also a calendar if you want to know what's coming up on the sort of global AOS scene or in your own backyard. If you go to aosevents.org, it will take you directly to the point on aosshorts.com where there is a calendar of all the major two-day events around the world, either as a simple list with links through to players packs and registrations, but there is also a Google Calendar which you can download if you want to keep up to date. If you're a tournament organizer and you're interested in getting on the list, please get in touch. Let me know. The easiest way is probably through Twitter, at Antipodean7 on Twitter, or through the website itself. Also, if you are a tournament organizer running one of these two-day events, it'd be great if you can drop me a line and send me through the lists after the event. It'd be greatly appreciated. Anyway, on for now, on with the show. Cheers. Hello. Now I am joined by Andrew Standiferd for our next Masterclass episode. Andrew is the recent two-time winner of the Las Vegas Open, a 100-plus player event in the USA and a top US Age of Sigmar match play gamer. How are you going, Andrew?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Yeah, good, thank you. Sort of mid-afternoon here at the workday. Got most of the major deadlines out of the way and closed the door. Put the phone on mute and get to talk some Age of Sigmar.
Oh, there you go. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No, you're welcome. I know it's sort of been a long day at your end and it's now in the evening, so I certainly appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
For those listening at home, if this is your first Masterclass episode that you've listened to, what we try and do is we interview top-tier Age of Sigmar gamers about tournament play. So we try to cover three particular things. We try to cover list writing. We then talk about preparing for a tournament outside writing your list, and then try and get some tips and advice from these guys on how to improve your play on the tabletop, including things such as deployment, dealing with the double turn, and coping with bad matchups. So hopefully we'll be able to cover all of that over the next sort of half an hour to an hour or so with Andrew, and learn as much as we can from him. So before we get started, Andrew, why don't you sort of introduce yourself, tell us a bit about your background, about Age of Sigmar, the sort of lists and armies that you're playing, and generally a bit more about you.
Hello, my name is Andrew Standiferd. I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico, part of the Rolling Bad crew. You probably know them from the podcast, the Chuckleheads, Alric, Bill, and them. But I've been playing Stormcast ever since the drop of Age of Sigmar. Elric got me into it. You can blame him. I played Fantasy in 7th and 8th, but I played Vampire Counts. But with the drop of Age of Sigmar, I really liked the Stormcast Eternals because I always kind of leaned more towards Space Marines and 40K. And I love the way they looked. I love the kind of like the theme of them, and I've always been more of a good guy myself. I mean, death doesn't really count for bad or good. It's more just in between, but Stormcast Eternals are definitely my bread and butter at the moment. I'm definitely enjoying them for quite some time now. I've been playing for like 2 years now. I've been playing anything from the Tempest Lords to my the first LVO list that I won with, which was the Wardens of the Realm Gate, which was definitely out of left field for a lot of people.
Yeah, I don't think many people would have
Then
predicted that.
no, it was really strong at the time, considering especially with the Vexilor before the Stormcast Battle Tome came out. He was a bit of a bad mamma jamma with his drop. You can just drop him anywhere on the table. I think I don't know at the time if it was outside of 3 inches or not. And then also with the explosion he caused, which was pretty cool. I actually used the I called it the Azeros bomb, where I drop him, and with that ability, so do D3 on top of D3 mortal wounds. Just kind of do a little mini explosion on stuff, especially against chaos, because it was pretty sweet. But then moved to, obviously with the new battle tome. Went with Vanguard Wing for a while. Tried a couple others here and there, especially early on. I really liked the Tempest Lords and the Vanguard Wing. Then GHB 17 dropped and extended the Vanguard Wing to 30, which changed the whole game, I think, for them. Made them a lot more resilient, especially against certain armies like Tzeentch, because then they could withstand the amount of mortal wound output that they can develop, even within a single turn or even a double turn. Because nothing's more scary, or nothing's scarier than a Tzeentch double turn when everything's within range of all their spells on both turns. Or
No,
Skyfires.
definitely. Yeah, that sheer amount of mortal wound output is something to behold.
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially when you're susceptible to mortal wounds.
You're talking to a
It's a
Sylvaneth
running
player
joke in my group.
here.
It's
Yeah,
a running joke from the Sylvaneth days when they were powerful.
yeah, and everything being susceptible to mortal wounds.
Yeah, it's like
But
never really getting a save against them. It's just you kind of count on the fact that you're gonna die, and you just have to plan for it the best you can, and hope for the best. Set it up properly, and put yourself in the best position to be able to withstand any kind of retaliation from such shenaniganry. Spells. What are those?
cool. So
It's all about
you
prayers to Sigmar.
yeah. So you took Vanguard Wing to the most recent LVO, LVO 2018, and then I see that Maha Massacre you took something a bit different, took a bit more of a mixed arms list with I think 4 fulminators and other bits and pieces. So a bit of a different change in list.
Yeah, it was just a generic Stormcast list, that one. With that list, I took to that event for the Mile of Massacre. I actually wanted to have a hero. I wanted to pick a Star Drake. It's just my Star Drake's not painted. But I wanted to take a hero that does a lot of damage and can actually kick some butt in hand to hand or in combat. And he's the only one that really does any damage, and he has the movement to do so. So I led with him, so I didn't really have to worry much for Battle Shock, and I kind of made every other unit just kind of MSU. So I never even if you did hit any of the other units, they wouldn't really suffer too bad. There was no real weakness or anywhere, because I think it was just 2 fulminators, 2 units, 2 long strikes, which I've fallen in love with because I usually drop them from the sky, and usually whatever I target with them, even if it's just one at a time. 'Cause generally, I get one, maybe two. I've never gotten none of them, and they kill almost whatever I want to target, which is usually an enemy hero, like a key one, like a Gaunt Summoner or something like that. Some guy that I just really need to eliminate that turn, and they have the range to do so with a 30-inch range. And then the versatility of the adjudicators. I think I took 2 units of those. 3 liberators, because you can't go wrong with liberators. The typical, staunch defender, mirror shield. Mirror shield actually never came into play in the whole event, because none of my opponents were really shooting at me. But And then I think that was pretty much the list. Oh no, and then my typical two prosecutors because I just love the prosecutors. I think that was really what sold me for Stormcast was the prosecutors. Those models are just amazing. I love them.
If you can get through painting all the wings, if you're running large units of them.
Oh yeah, I own far too many of them. It's anywhere between like 30 or 40 of them. It's ridiculous. I think I'm coming up close on Ben Johnston outside the Star Drake level. I'm never gonna own more than two, but definitely on model count wise, I'm up in like the about 300, 400 models for my army. I have about
Wow.
like 120 liberators, 60 to 80 paladins. Uh, if only paladins were actually good in this game. They're just so slow.
Yeah, massive
It's
change
like,
in the army over the additions of Age of Sigmar that we've had so far. Uh,
oh
I
yeah,
think
I'm looking
probably
forward to the
only
next drop.
yeah, it'll be interesting to see where things go. And we'll probably come back
Mm,
and have a talk a bit more about the current state of Stormcast and the meta and where they sit
mm.
now that we've had this sort of chain of rapid fire, Daughters of Cain, Legions of Nagash, and Maggotkin, all very, very close after each other, and what we think that means for
Oh yeah.
Stormcast. But why don't we go back and let's start with what do you take into account when you're writing a tournament army list? If you're sitting down, blank piece of paper, what are the things that you are thinking about when you're making a list?
Well, depends on which angle you want to try and go for. If you're wanting to go for more of a like a durable army, if you want to include like the Castellan, and if you include Castellan, you want to try and have other units that are larger, usually more than five, because otherwise you're not really using it unless you have a unit of fulminators. I'd say that's the only reason. But you want to have some durability to go with it, and obviously your battle lines. But you can't go wrong with that. I think they have some of the best battle lines in the game, mixed with both liberators and adjudicators. So it's not like it's hard to pick and choose, just depending on how much you want of each. Because I mean, you can obviously take a lot of them, or you can take the minimum of them. I always try and with any list, I've always been more of a, I guess, close to a take all comer style list player, where I want a little bit of both. I want some shooting so I can reach out and touch someone if I need to, but also be able to hit them in the face as well. I'm not saying like, like overwhelm them in combat, but like where I can pick and choose my battles in certain areas to where I know I can at least be use those units to the best of their abilities. Uh, as far as heroes go, uh, depends on which angle you want to go for. If you're wanting to go for like Relictors are probably the go-to at the moment, just because prayers are so good and they're so cheap for what they do, on top of their own prayer as well. Because I mean, anywhere between Lightning Chariot and Blessed Weapons, which are the go-to, in my opinion. I also like Divine Light. Divine Light's very good too in certain situations, but in tournaments, because you can only choose one for the whole event, usually you want to go with those two because I mean they'll be helpful throughout the entire event no matter what. Even if like Lightning Chariot, a lot of people say, well, I never really use it. Is like, well, like save turn one, you use it, you can use it just to move that unit like 12 inches forward because Liberator's only with five. With a good run, they might get like nine, but you can at least always depend on how far you want to move them and then daisy chain them however you like. On top of the fact that with you can lightning chariot them out of combat and go and move them somewhere else and possibly charge. Yeah, it's a 9-inch charge, but I mean, doing the reset up and charge thing without actually having to retreat is kind of amazing. And I think that's the biggest strength of Vanguard Wing, to be honest, is the ability to reset up, that you're never retreating. You're just literally leaving combat and going wherever you want again. And now obviously charging again, but instead of setting up within the 3 inches like a lot of people were doing. Uh, yeah, I was doing it mainly because it was easier and it would save time. There was actually in the LVO there was only one game where it actually took place and mattered, where I actually leapfrogged my opponent. Whereas the rest of them, all it did was just set them up within the 3 inches to save time instead of having to go back and charge later and whatnot. And now obviously you have to do that, but that was the reason before, is just it saved time, to be honest.
Yeah. No, you can't ever underestimate the value that comes from that movement, and movement in a way that is a setup, so you avoid the sort of restrictions that come with moving, and you get the added benefit of setup, freedom, the ability to change formation, just the toolbox that comes with that is amazing. You were touching on sort of hero setups, and I think that's, from an outsider's perspective or someone starting in Stormcast, I always think that's something which puts in a large number of variables, or can be a challenge, or can be difficult for people to decide what the sort of optimum hero setup is that they want, and the sort of things that they want to take into account. Because with Stormcast, you just get so much more choice in terms of which heroes you take and your loadouts for those heroes. So there's a few standout choices in terms of relictors and mirror shields and things like that. But have you got any other considerations or advice for people who are trying to think about which heroes they take in a Stormcast army?
I would say for sure the Lord Celestron Dracoth is always solid because he has a shield. I mean, he's outside the Star Drake the most durable single unit, like single model in the Stormcast army. I mean, with Staunch Defender, you're an automatic 2-up, rerolling 1s. If you got a Lord Celestin on you, you're healing on 5s with a 1-up save, which is pretty terrifying against anything that can't cause mortal wounds. I mean, you face any army, even with Ren 2 or 3, I mean, you can still withstand a lot of firepower, and you have the most wounds on that one. But his command ability is which really stands out with him. That 24-inch bubble of just ignoring Battle Shock. I don't know if people really get how effective that can really be. And sometimes instead of having to rely on casting Inspiring Presence on a unit, it's just you don't even worry about it. And generally, he's in the middle and the thick of it all. So every unit's pretty much within 24 inches of, because that's a 48-inch bubble that he's casting
Massive
out.
bubble.
It's pretty much table wide.
Yeah,
if you're wanting to go for more.
Yeah, it's if you're sitting there and you're going, well, look, I've got an elite army. I don't have a large number of bodies on the table. I just can't afford to be losing extra bodies to Battle Shock. So having such a large bubble as that is just so crucial for Stormcast.
Oh yeah, exactly. If you're wanting to go for more of a hard hit 'em list style list, where if you're wanting to make certain units more effective, I'd take the Lord Celestin on foot, because that plus the Furious Retribution with the +1 to hit in combat is pretty stout, especially when you're doing it with Liberators or Fulminators or even Paladins, because that definitely makes Paladins a lot more beefy in combat, especially the Retributors. I think Retributors outside of, if you're taking Retributors, you pretty much have to take him, because there's so much stuff in the game now that causes debuffs, -1 to hits at some point in combat, whether it's a spell or an ability that you're eliminating your own ability of like smashing with that hammer just by going up against a unit like that, and that's usually what you want to hit, is their strongest unit with that unit, and you're already kind of handicapping yourself by not having the best, tools to go into that combat with. You can't go wrong with a Knight Heralder. I do love him because as much as I dislike Tzeentch, I am no fan of Sylvaneth, and anything that puts them down, I'm happy. And the Heralder definitely lights the trees on fire. Yeah.
If you're playing on a decent tabletop, be interesting to see whether or not you get a lot of that with Maggotkin of Nurgle and the new Gnarlmores and other things, which will of course be Heraldor targets.
Mm-hmm. it definitely helps against them, considering all the types of saves they can do and generate themselves. They've become a very durable army themselves in a different manner than Stormcast.
Yeah, the extra layers really make a difference. Just
Mm.
if we're talking at a sort of theoretical level, when you're writing army lists, you've said that you try and go for a mixed all-comers list. You try and have a bit of range in order to help with pieces that are behind enemy lines, etc. Bit of combat. Do you sort of take a math hammer approach to it? Do you sit there and analyze what are the sort of most efficient damage output units and that sort of thing, or is it a feel and experience from gameplay and trial and error sort of approach that you take?
I think it's more like a feel and an experience style approach to it, because like say long strikes sounds great, but I've actually come to the experience that a single unit of long strikes is absolutely horrible. If you just take one, you're always going to be disappointed in the end. I've played them multiple times just by themselves and always just felt wanting more, and they just like they didn't do enough, you know.
Yeah, it's the
Even
same
with
with
like
it's
even
the
below
Kerner's
average
Hunter with
rolling.
yeah, it's the
Oh
Kerner's
yeah,
Hunter with
exactly.
Great Bro problem is that you've got to think not only about sort of average damage output, but the variability of that damage output, which is always the way with units which have got sort of D3 damage or high hit rolls, is that when you hit, you do a lot of damage, but you're either going to miss a lot or you're going to roll ones on your D3s and you're going to be underperforming.
Exactly. Yeah. Then one of the other things I always like to approach is always have some kind of unit that kind of causes your opponent to have some sort of pause in wanting to, say, just charge forward and attack you. Something that can counter assault your opponent in case they try and hit you hard, and not necessarily out in the front lines. I've always kind of used fulminators in that manner. I never really just go blazing out there. I kind of keep them behind my other walls, especially like while I'm trying to take objectives and whatnot, and shooting my opponent, and even hitting them in combat, because liberators are no slouches in combat with that beautiful grand hammer. But with the ability to countercharge with a unit of fulminators, it just really gives people pause in general, that they know that if they like say hit that unit of liberators or your adjudicators, that there's the strong possibility that you can countercharge and hit them and very well wipe their unit out. So they have to, kind of estimate their chances and weigh whether it's worth it or not.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It's always they put the choice on the opponent and also the positioning your units in a way that you can maximize that opportunity to countercharge. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're the opponent and you're faced with that option, you've got to think about, well, how do I do my charge? How do I position my units in a way that I sort of tag a unit on the end so I don't expose myself to a counter charge from the other side or otherwise. It's also interesting to hear that you use fulminators in that way. I haven't played with Stormcast. I played with Sylvaneth or other armies, and I've always thought of fulminators as a sort of good flanking unit, as sort of big enough in order to bully a flank or threaten an objective without too much in the way of overt support from your army. But it's interesting to hear that you sort
Mm-hmm.
of might play them a bit closer, at least in the early turns, at least. Is that sort of the role that
Yeah.
you see for fulminators?
As far as I am, yeah, I think the Paladars have definitely taken the flanking role away from the Fulminators, whereas the Fulminators are more durable, and you can kind of put them in the middle and kind of wait for the charge, and even weather getting shot at. And the biggest problem is I don't like to put them out there against certain armies because they obviously have so few wounds for such a high cost that any kind of more wound output can really ruin their day. And their worst matchup is definitely Zinch.
Yeah.
They can definitely get rocked by some Skyfires or some, basic spells in general. You can lose one to just a single spell, and that you feel it. that pain. It's like, just lost a whole fulminator to a spell. Oh, well, there you go. But like keeping them back kind of like that, where you want them to just kind of keep them in prime position to attack. I mean, there's some times where you can just throw them out to the wind and not really care. You can throw a Lord Castellan buff on them and just send them out there and not have to worry about anything. But then there's certain armies that you kind of have to I have that restraint to like keep them for that key charge or that counter charge that you really need. Paladors, I think, really took the role for the flanking because they have such an ranged shooting on top of their speed. 'Cause, I mean, yeah, 2 inches is 2 inches, but that's quite a bit more. And on top of their ability to just move anywhere on the table with that special movement that they have is just ridiculous. It's like because they can just reform on any side of the table they want, pretty much. Prosecutors are in like the way I've always used them. I've always used them as the kind of unit that harasses my opponent on the sides. And because I mean, javelins, when one unit, just nothing. But when you're doing like 3, 4, 5 units, it tends to add up. With all the javelins being thrown on there, and even if you just say like you have a 20-man unit of skeletons on one flank or something, and you just literally just try and charge, or bloodletters, for example, that's a good one. You just charge because you got that long distance charge with 3 dice, and all you want to do is just reach out and touch that very edge and just screw up their ability to move. So then they can't charge on that turn. Yeah, they might kill one, maybe even two. If they kill two, then there's a possibility you might lose the last one to battle shock. Not necessarily you will or will not, but sometimes it's worth that risk to make sure that that 30-man unit of bloodletters can't get a charge off on their turn. And I mean, it's just stuff like that really helps
out. It's a great
out.
unit. Yeah,
oh yeah, I love them.
Chris Welfare of the Mortally Wounded podcast is a massive fan of them. He was running lots under Tempest Lords before GHB 17. And
I was running 8 in Tempest Lords at the time.
It's the movement, the flexibility, that MSU approach. It reminds you of sort of Dark Elves in Warhammer 8th edition.
Oh yeah, and they were definitely annoying. Oh.
Harassing flanks with mobile flying units and Dark Riders and Warlocks and all the jazz that you used to have.
Right.
So no, it's a bit of a shame that now Tempest Lords 440 points worth of battalions or
something? You can still play a list, and I think they can be competitive. I just don't think they can win a GT. I think they have a lot of bad matchups. I think they can win like your local events or even like a low level GT, but nothing like past maybe like 35 or 32 players, because you're just gonna run into those bad matchups. I think like KO is definitely a big one for them because they're not an army that likes to get hit back at ranged.
Yeah.
Because usually they try and hit you and run away and try and focus on key objectives. And now it's just too darn expensive, especially since they increased the points of the prosecutors to 100 from 80. I really wish they would have dropped the hammers to 80 because, I mean, nobody ever plays them. It's kind of like just like the go-to. Everybody just goes to the javelins because the hammers just don't really do anything.
Yeah, so it's the sort of problem with the game dynamic that we have, which is a sort of flat, for most units, is a flat price, regardless of your weapon choice. So thinking about, you're sort of talking about the tough counters in tournament meta at the top end. And so what do you see as being the sort of the top end Stormcast build, both now and sort of predicting, looking out 3-6 months or so, until we get the next General's Handbook, given the light of the recent releases? What do you see the future of top table Stormcast looking like?
Well, I can definitely see the Lord Ordinator taking a big role in the game moving forward for a lot of people because they like the shooting. Nothing's scarier than a unit that can shoot you but doesn't have to see you, not only once but twice, while being blessed. I was like, that Hellstorm rocket battery combo was pretty terrifying. I think the only army that actually kind of gave me pause of wanting to take it was Maggotkin, and that's just because they're the wheel. You don't have to see to do that D3 mortal wounds, and you can just hit the
Yeah.
crew and totally cripple it. But outside that, you can pretty much hide that Hellstorm rocket battery from almost anything in the game because it's not very big, and your liberators can put up a pretty big wall, and prosecutors can block line of sight like nobody's business. And yeah, 36-inch range, hitting on threes. If you bless it, doing additional shots on fours twice a turn can be pretty terrifying, I think, in my opinion. Rend 3, d6 damage per shot.
Yeah, it's the telling people that it's Rend 3 and D6 damage, and their sort of jaw drops because I can't really think of anything else in the game that does
Right?
that kind of output from such a small, sort of innocent little free guild unit.
Oh yeah, and you can technically do it on hitting on twos, generating additional shots on threes if you get damn terrain, because you only have to do the damn terrain on the war machine itself, not on the crew, because it's the war machine shooting. So it gets an additional +1 that one turn that can just be totally terrifying, where you're generating additional shots on threes and hitting on twos. It's just like, yeah, that's not scary at all. It's like, okay, so you can generate basically about 12 shots at Rend 3, d6 shots, damage each. Okay, all right, let's push the brakes on that one. But I like that he was only has a 4-up save, so it makes him a little more vulnerable. But then you just stick the mirror shield on him, and he's suddenly less vulnerable with Staunch Defender as well. As my buddy would say, that he would love to see Staunch Defender go away,
Yeah.
because it's kind of the staple for every Stormcast army. But
You mentioned that Maggotkin was going to give you some pause. Are there other apart from Zinj? Do you see? Yeah, sigh. Do you see Daughters of Cain or Legions of Nagash or others changing the way that you build Stormcast lists?
I don't see not really as much because, well, at least if you can get double artifacts, usually you're gonna kind of go with the staple. I know it's the generic, at least for events, because it's kind of like you said, just a take all comers style that you really want to go for, at least in my opinion. That because you're gonna face all sorts of different armies, you try and give yourself the best opportunity against each and every army. That you go with the general with Staunch Defender and Mirror Shield, and then you want to take that Lord Castellan or even a Knight of Zeros with the Lantern to make everybody or not -1, but everybody within 6 inches, they have to reroll sixes to hit in the shooting phase against that unit, which can really hurt a lot of the shooting aspects of Daughters of Cain. Um, Obviously, they have the hits in combat, but I mean, they're not exactly durable because they're very much a glass cannonball, just like they were before. And that if you can shoot off key units or even just give them kind of like a flak unit to hit first, to just like a not even necessarily a throwaway, but just a 5-man unit of liberators that you have to screen with. They have to hit that unit first, and then you counter them, and then you can kind of cripple them. The said units like the snakes or the harpies that do a lot more damage in combat.
Yeah.
I think it's just because you're not going to reliably deploy yourself within the 9 inches and rely on that 9-inch charge. Shooting definitely is an option, especially at Ren 2 with the I like to call them harpies and snakes.
Yeah.
But
Fair enough. We know what
coming
you
in that
mean.
turn, yeah, coming in that turn and making it Ren 2 the turn they drop, it's kind of made me think about, not obviously not right now, but later on, I want to get a little bit of them just to take them as allies, because I mean, only 80 points for 5 of them. That's what it
It's
was,
a
right? 80
bargain.
for 5?
Yeah, 80 for 5. You can have a unit of 10 for 160. You're dropping down. You can drop any turn you want. You're -2 red.
Exactly. That's the big thing. It's dropping any turn you want.
Yeah. So you can rely on them. Your opponent's got to think about where they come. You've got the ability to move, potentially the ability to move again after shooting. I can see myself getting a couple of boxes coming up just to play around with, because they're just such a good unit, it would seem.
And I mean, you could just use them as like, even necessarily as a screen as well. You drop them down, and then you create this like wall. Like, say you just want to drop down in front of your opponent, like say turn 1. All of a sudden they can't run forward and go towards the objectives they want to try and hit. But you're still causing a bunch of damage on those frontline units while also preventing them from moving forward for only 160 points.
Yeah. It's really, really good. Those sort of Daughters of Cain, Legions of Nagash. I always think of Stormcast as being an army where you're not going to get, it's not like Tzeentch in that you're going to have overwhelming damage output in a single turn across multiple phases. You, as a Stormcast player, and as one of our local players regularly says, you need to play all 5 turns, because you're relying on the damage output that your resilient units can do over the course of 5 turns, not in any particular turn, and taking objectives late and all the other things that come with Stormcast lists. So Legions of Nagash at least would seem to offer a challenge for Stormcast in that they can put up large amounts of regenerating chaff that are going to outnumber you, important in an objectives game, and you're either going to have to concentrate all of your firepower in order to wipe a unit off, or it's just you're going to do some damage and then they're going to regenerate and they're just going to keep holding you there. And Nagash or Arkan or whoever at the back is going to be just popping away at your units. So how do you see the sort of Legions of Nagash Stormcast matchup going forward?
I think Legions of Nagash, they're definitely you're gonna have to approach them in a different manner, because obviously they're a board control army for sure. They just try and swarm the table, try and take the objectives, and then wither you down by just not dying themselves. You have to really focus on your deployment, on how you react to their movement, and target priority is just the biggest thing you got to focus on. That'd be like one of the games where you'd want to try and kind of lead a little bit with, say, like Fulminators, because they can do a ridiculous amount of damage to a unit of skeletons. But you also want to, because they can only do Inspiring Presence to one unit, you want to try and open it up to where you can hit one or the other. You can't just like make it look like, oh, I'm just going to hit the one unit on the right. You want to make it where you're available to hit multiple units. Yeah, you can do the whole like screen of like one giant unit in the front, which can be a pain in the butt, but at some point you're going to get through that one unit, because obviously that'll be the unit that they're kind of trying to get rid of as they press forward, and you're going to hit it first and then try and, I guess, maybe shoot past that unit and make the other units really wither and die from either shooting or just focus target priority, because that's the biggest thing I think in this game is target priority. And there are certain armies that are very unforgiving with target priority if you even just kind of misstep on it. KO is definitely a big one. If you really want to kill a little bit of that unit, but you don't focus and kill it all, or you didn't set yourself up right with all your units to be able to kill that one unit, or you killed it too soon, and then you're left out of position, But as far as their spells, I'm not too worried about. They're great, and I mean they can diminish you, but they're very close. Like obviously just the 18 inches.
Unless you're running Arcan, you can get a bit more range out of Arcan. Yeah. But yeah, they are generally medium to short term.
I'd be worried more about Nagash personally. just because of its durability. Arcan, I know I can focus on kill from a decent range. Nagash, I really can't. He's just more of a, well, you're on the table. Congratulations. I'm just going to ignore you and kill your army. Good luck winning when you're just the only model left.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I do right now against Magakin. You ignore the Great Unclean One with Endless Gift. Kill everything else.
Yeah.
And you're basically just wasting shots and attacks if you're trying, unless you can say do a single drop like a Vanguard Wing, for example, on him. Yeah, I think you could kill him in a single drop, hitting him. I'm not saying you will, I'm saying you could, but that's going to be one of your better options. But there's so many better options laid out on the table than just that one. Uh, don't bite the shiny red apple that is Nagash. You want to focus on the stuff that helps them win the game. I mean, outside of Duality of Death, he ain't doing much other than buffing and casting a couple spells here and there. He doesn't do a ridiculous amount of damage with his spells.
Unless you're going for the full combat Nagash. I've seen some builds with the sort of full combat, first turn charge Nagash into your lines, and dishing out damage left, right, and center. But yes, if I
wouldn't mind that kind of. If you want to feed me Nagash, I'll take it.
I suppose if you've got a 30-man unit of Liberators for him to smack into, then I suppose you don't care too much.
I mean, he's durable. He's because he's normally just a 3-up rerolling ones, kind of solid with 16 wounds. Is he? Is he 16? I'm trying to remember.
I think he's 16. If he's passing off wounds to some more gas nearby and other such things.
Right. Yeah. I think the stronger build is probably Legion of Night, but that's just because my heart's on Manfred. It's going back to the Vampire Count days. He was my boy, and that +1 save to your whole army and your deployment's pretty solid.
It is, and I've seen there's quite a lot of love for Vampire Lords on Zombie Dragons, with Prince Vordry as well. You can have the full Flappy Bird Monster Mash kind of Deathless.
Yeah, that's definitely a cool one. Yeah, that's one of the things I love about Death is there's so many different ways to play them, and they have monsters. That's the one thing that my buddy's giving me shit. There's like a bunch of stuff for it, but I just wish I had some kind of like monsters outside the Star Drake, just something I can just take. It'd be really cool to have some like kind of like ultra, like some giant retributor dude or something like the Gorgorath, but like in Stormcast armor or something. Just some kind of monster-esque feel to some models in there.
You're probably the only person that I've heard complain that the Stormcast doesn't have enough unit options.
No, the problem is, no, it's not that they don't have enough. It's that there's so much. It's like, it makes me just want more.
Yeah.
It's just you have.
I want more Stormcast.
Yeah, well, I want my War Machine now because they showed me the Lord Ordinator. So obviously I can't just be relying on the Empire or free guilds, War Machines, and I can't fit an Ironclad because they schemed that up properly. It's like 440 points. They thought ahead on that one. I was like, but
oh God.
just like some kind, I don't know, like some kind of cool thing like that. I guess in 40K I love Godzilla Tyranids too. I mean, I guess I grew up with the whole Godzilla versus giant robots kind of thing, and I've always loved monsters in general.
So
that's all.
It's nothing to do with the fact that the 7 Flyrant list is apparently quite bent in the 40K meta at the moment.
Yeah, I kind of try to avoid that. I've actually, just because of the way, I love 40K, and I've been playing it since I was 13. That's going on 21 years now. Back in 2nd edition. It's definitely in a good place. I just think you can still take advantage of a little bit too much of the rules, whereas you can't do that as much in AOS. Then that's what I love about it, is you can't just take this, ridiculous army. There's some stuff that you have to take with it, or it costs you. I mean, the battalions in 40K didn't cost you points before, or I don't remember what they were called all of a sudden, but the equivalent of battalions. And battalions now, especially after GHB 17, they cost a lot. You're paying a lot, unless you're playing the, what are they called, the ever chosen ones.
Yeah, there's a few exceptions. There's the sort of outliers of Plague Touched and others which seem to be slightly out of line, because they're almost that sort of creature of the past. Whilst sort of the more modern Sylvaneth, Stormcast battalions have all got significant increase. They're sort of fairly level. There's a few Zinch ones which might be a little under, but hey, it's the point of the sort of yearly points update, which is to pick those sorts of things up.
Come on, they can't change Zinch, They gotta make sure they give them plenty of love. they don't get enough. No. I do like the monsters in Death. They're a lot of fun. Terrorgeist and zombie dragons. Obviously, you can't play the Mournguls, which is sad, but oh well. Darn.
I think Forgeworld decided that they'd broken the mold, and decided that they didn't want to sell any more Mournguls. They got the change made. Yeah, we've sold enough now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, we're good. You guys can just tone it down now. We'll just give it to Soulblight as an ally. That's it. Nobody else can have it outside of Nighthaunt. So it's like, wait, Soulblight? It's like, yeah, it's vampires. They know how to pimp that stuff out.
Yeah. But, so cool. We've kind of covered quite a few things there. Why don't we move on to the next sort of topic of what did you do to prepare for a tournament? So outside of writing your list and covering off the things that we've sort of covered, what else do you do in terms of preparing for an event, say a big one like LVO?
Obviously you want to test play, see what kind of style list you want to put out there, what you feel comfortable that you can take and against the lead armies, as it were, in the meta. Like at the time, it was obviously Change Host, KO, Clown Car was a big one. I think a Maggotkin just dropped, but a buddy of mine dropped 120 Plague Monks, which was pretty solid. Every time I'd pop one, it was the possibility of just taking some wounds, which was pretty cool. But you definitely want to look at the meta. Is definitely a big part of any event you want to go to see what you can take. If you're planning on wanting to try and do your best to win the event, and try and give yourself the best options that you feel comfortable with. That goes with your play style. I mean, some people may want to do something along the lines of the Hammer Strike Force, because they love the Paladins and they want to hit you right in the face, like turn 1 or turn 2. You just kind of try and build a list around how you would go against certain armies like that. I think if you want to go with Paladins, I think the better option is Skyborn Slayers, just because it has some good matchups against the KO. But, you definitely want to kind of reach out for that, and then test play it as much as you can with your local groups, and see what your friends have, like the people within your groups. And now with I'm not a part of really any of them, but the WhatsApp chats really help out a lot too. Try and reach out and get the opinions of others to see what they feel might be your best options, and what units you may be throwing as an idea out there, what you want to take, what you may or may not want to take. And some units can be considered a throwaway unit, and some cannot be to some people. I kind of regretted not taking a Gryph-hound to the event because of Zinch being so predominant. It was definitely the most predominant army at LVO. I think it was like 4 or 5 in the top 10. Was it for
I'd
Zinch?
have to look it up, but I think it might have been 3 or 4 in the top 10. And it was
Yeah,
probably might have been 20% of the list overall or something like that.
right. I mean, Stormcast, yeah, but I mean, like, there's a difference between just change host, which that's all it was, and then the vast different amounts of Stormcast lists that you had out there. You had the Vanguard Chambers. Like, I saw people running a bunch of Hunters and Paladors and stuff like that, and then like Hammer Strikes and whatnot, just different types of lists, and just Star Drakes. It was just like it was kind of cool to see all those, like, just not a spam of Vanguard wing. Yeah, I took it, but I mean, I felt I wanted to take it to the event just to see how it would work out. And I mean, gave myself what I believed at the time to be the best option to try and take on certain armies like the Disciples of Zinch, or what I believe Maggotkin were. I mean, they just dropped, but it's not like people didn't already have all those models. And I mean, even a week's test play, you can put some like ideas together and throw it on the tabletop. But those are probably the biggest things I can say for anybody going to any big event.
It's all very
To
good
just
advice.
yeah, just test play, and then like just really take a look at the meta. I mean, because I mean, with uh, the LVO, you're going to get a lot more people from around the United States and even outside the United States. But when it comes to, say, local events, you can kind of get a feel of what your opponents are they have a feel for what they want to play. So sometimes you don't have to go over the top. You can play more, I guess, balanced and not so over the top lists if you wanted to. Just depending on what it is and how you feel that the meta is in that area.
Yeah, definitely, and the sort of the
Obviously, at
type of
Adepticon,
event you're going to, and also sort of tailoring the list for the type of event you're going to, depending
yeah,
on the sort of expectations of the sort of level of list which is going to be brought. As you say, there's a
hmm
difference between LVO versus maybe a local 20-player event or something like that.
yeah. One of the other reasons I took a Vanguard wing, at least at the time, with the whole within 3 inches. I mean, it's not so much different now, but it's just there's a certain aspect of saving time with that list that people don't realize, and it helps it to where you can finish every one of your games a lot faster by like planning ahead what you want to do in every turn and seeing where you want to go. No matter what your opponent may do, you might change part of your plan, but you still have a scheme and an idea what you want to do. And that army really helps mitigate the whole time saving thing. Just because placing your models exactly where you want to. I mean, now you just have to have a bunch of like 3 or 4 combat gauges. You put them out in front of your opponents, and then you just place the models
Yeah.
instead of just obviously placing them in. But that's I think a big part of it too. Just knowing what you can do with that kind of army. If you say play Bone Splitters, there are a lot of people that play Bone Splitters regularly and can play all their rounds, which is awesome. But there are also the people that can't, and that's not exactly the greatest experience for some people. Where it's like I got to round 2 and I was playing Bone Splitters. Like, yeah, you feel like
Yeah, no,
20 minutes
you don't
later, you're
want
still
that.
in your shooting phase. No, that was my hero phase. It's like, oh my gosh.
No, you don't want that kind of thing. The Thinking about the Vanguard wings, you're just talking about it. Do you have any tips and advice for players playing against Vanguard wing?
uh, that's honestly like a tough question to answer. I mean, there's ways of getting around them, but overall, I think the best ways obviously is don't be so scared to try and kill your opponent's heroes if you can, because the army doesn't rely around the heroes, but they definitely help keep the unit uh like to be able to be as survivable as they are with, like, say, a 2-up save rerolling ones. And then the biggest key is honestly, if you don't want to touch the characters at all, go for the prosecutors. Because the moment you take out all the prosecutors, depending on how many they may have, but minimum 9, if you eliminate their prosecutors, or even say if you eliminate 6 on one side, you you kind of limit where they're going to deploy or whether they can even redeploy. Because prosecutors aren't as durable as liberators because you just have so many liberators, and obviously they're getting the buffs, whereas your prosecutors are not.
Yeah.
Try and, I guess, go for more board control and obviously bubble wrap, or just give your chaff units out there so they can't hit your key units on the turn they come in. So it's more of just so you don't get bombarded by that massive unit, especially with the Grand Hammers. Even going so far as to if you're not going to go for the Castellan or whoever the general may be, it might be the Relictor, but maybe get rid of the Relictors because blessed weapons is kind of a big thing for them. It's not necessarily something they need, but it definitely helps. Getting rid of blessed weapons can definitely help you. If you're Iron Jaws, I don't know what to tell you. I'm sorry, you pretty much lost the game from the turn
Yeah, you just
from the moment you
apologize.
got on the table with them. Well, I mean, when you don't have any ranged output whatsoever, I think you're kind of in trouble. I mean, like spells help, obviously, but the problem is if your opponent's smart, they can mitigate what your spells can do to them. So they can't hit your key units, it's just keep them
Yeah.
just out of range. But I think that's one of the key things that a lot of armies suffer from that don't have any ranged whatsoever and focus too much on combat. But at least say death, they make up for it with their numbers, and their ability to pop models back up and regrow, and even their spells are still pretty darn good, because you can get stuck in on a unit of skeletons and then they can kind of debuff you and then just overwhelm you by taking the objectives because they have like 40 skeletons. So if you're obviously you're generally going to take 30 liberators, but sometimes you may not, because if you take even a 15-man unit of Vanguard Wing, that's still a lot of damage that can go anywhere on the table with the right placement of prosecutors. And I mean, it's not as expensive, but it still does a lot of damage. So,
No,
but
definitely. That's
I'd say
good
those are the
advice.
main things you really want to focus on against the Vanguard Wing is either the heroes with blessed weapons or just really focus on the prosecutors and get rid of them as soon as you can, or mitigate where they can land, I guess,
Three very good
because I know
ways.
a lot of people will
So,
drop them in.
so let's move on to the sort of how you play on the tabletop. And so you get into the tournament, you are at the table, you look across at your opponent's army. What are the things that you take into account? What are the things that you are looking for in your opponent's army? How do you plan your deployment? What are the things that you sort of take into account at the start of the game?
Well, obviously, depending from opponent to opponent, you try and give yourself the best option you can. And for like with Vanguard Wing, it's a little easier for deployment, but still, your placement of your heroes is always kind of key. So either if they have good range, you don't want them to take a blast of heat down on turn 1 or turn 2, but on top of that, you want to really focus on what the mission is and where you really want to focus your army, where you believe your opponent may focus their army as well, and try and see if you can maybe play into their strengths, kind of giving them like a sense of overconfidence that you may have bit into their plan when you're just trying to buy time to play the mission and set it up for the end game. Try and just win the overall mission. Uh, the one thing I always tell everybody, always focus on the mission. Don't deviate from the mission. And then the biggest problem that a lot of people have that I know, that they tend to feed into their opponents, like what they want them to do. It's like it's like kind of like a trap, where they'll set up some stuff and move some units in position and, try and bait you. Not necessarily always bait you, obviously. It's a very subtle bait, but, uh, even doing that in certain turns can kind of, have the snowball effect. And that's what usually your plan can end up being, is to kind of like, get certain units out to focus them somewhere else or to use them in a different way against certain units. Uh, with the Vanguard wing, the deployment doesn't, I mean, with obviously Liberators doesn't matter as much because you can just put them out in the back, or you usually just sometimes screen them, like screen the rest of your army, because they're just durable enough against most things in the game that they're not too worried about taking a hit. I'd say the only army that you really don't want to take a full assault from would be KO, because they can shoot the stuff, and then Engine Raiders can hurt the unit pretty bad. Yeah, I mean, yeah, they can roll poorly. They can roll a bunch of ones when they do those D3s, but I mean, they can still cripple a 30-man unit of Liberators. Always focus on screening.
Can do some work.
Oh yeah, they definitely can. Always focus on screening, even if it means, you're screening with like Judicators. If you feel the it's worth it in the end to keep your main unit alive, just with them, sacrificing them, then go for it, because you may feel that this unit may be needed later in the game, whereas that one not so much. One of the other things I forgot to mention for any event, always look at the pack. Always look at the pack. Read the missions, figure out what missions they're doing, how many rounds they're doing, and then what kind of custom rules they may be doing. Because there's always some kind of custom rules, whether there's like kind of like secondary or tertiary missions too, because nothing worse than making a list and then realizing you kind of put yourself into a worse position when you go to that event, when it doesn't help as much as you would like in those missions or according to their pack.
Yeah.
So, that would be my best advice for deployment, at least. Like, just try and mitigate any kind of big charges against any of the units that you don't want to get charged. Screening is always the number one tool that you have in anybody's army, no matter who you are. Like Sylvaneth have Dryads, just the screening is such a big part of the game. I only have Liberators, but sometimes that 2 5-man unit Liberators can block something really key to help me down later on in the game. So
very cool. So sort of moving on to the next topic, which people always sort of talk about after deployment, is the priority roll and double turn. So how do you think about and take into account the priority roll and the prospect of either a double turn for yourself or a double turn for your opponent during the game?
I play every single game that I always set up myself like I'm going to lose a priority roll. Never like I'm going to win it. If I do win it, then I'm probably in the best position if possible. I only ever take the early double turns if I feel it's in my absolute best interest, or like say you like you don't want to set yourself up for a horrible double turn from Zinch, but sometimes you just can't prevent it. So you try and mitigate it to the best of your ability for the first turn of being double turns. So like you want to try and mitigate what's in range of what for, like, say, their spells, or what can charge what, or what can shoot what.
Yep.
You always want to put yourself in the best possible I guess, position to withstand a double turn. There are many times where I feel like I could be double turned. I mean, because you get forced to take, the top of one, and then they go second. And it's like, well, they get really anxious. I think I've only ever done it maybe 2 or 3 times in all of AOS where I've taken the double turn on turn two, like the bottom of one, turn, like top of turn two. I think it's almost kind of like a trap in my opinion, but that's just me. I think it's way too early. You kind of, unless you are completely on your back foot, you should never do it. I actually like to always try and take the second turn period if I can. Like throughout an entire event. Yeah, just like go second the entire event if I can. I feel you put yourself in a better position, and then you also eliminate the possibility of being double turned, which is always good. So, but yeah, I guess the best answer I could give is just really focus on what your opponent can do with a double turn and what you can do to the best of your ability to prevent that by setup, deployment, movement, or even just screening, what you can set up so they have to hit certain units before they can hit your other units. Because nobody wants to get double turned by a Vanguard wing unit, but that doesn't necessarily mean you will. But always, like I said, I always plan like I'm going to lose a priority roll. Sometimes you really hope you win it, because sometimes the game gets pretty close, and you feel if you do win that priority roll, that can not just determine the game, but that can maybe seal the game for you. Like, say my round 7, like the finals of LVO, we were on turn 5, and I knew going into turn 5 that I was against Joe Cryer, and I knew going into turn 5 I would be a point ahead of him if I won the turn, at the end of the game. Say I won the priority roll, that I would just take middle objective and my objective, and then basically forget the middle objective and defend my objective as much as possible, and so he can't get around it, and set it up to where I was, no matter what, he would have had to gained all 3 objectives on turn 5, on bottom of 5, to win the game, because I was 1 point ahead of him. Always pay attention to where your points are in the mission, and where you're, say how many points you are, or how far you are down, depending on the mission, because obviously some of them escalate, where it's like 4 points on turn 4 and 5 points on turn 5. You can play the end game if you feel you can play the full game, then do it and go for it. Make sure that you can try and put yourself in the best possible scenario for it, especially for the priority roll, because that can sometimes make or break a game.
Yeah, definitely. So we might have covered this off sort of as we've gone through the course of the show, but for people who are looking to improve their tournament performance, people who are sort of maybe new to tournaments or sort of mid-table and wanting to move up, what's the sort of best tactics or strategy advice you would give them? If there was sort of one thing that they could focus on, what do you think's the thing that will move the dial most for people?
Just in general, for any player in general?
Yep, any player in general.
Know your rules. Know your rules, and the biggest thing is know your opponent's rules. In playing in 40K, I always tried to know everything that came out up until like maybe mid 7th. It got chaotic towards the end where there was just so much. But
too much offense.
In AOS, you can know every rule for every unit. Obviously, not every battalion, because then it actually costs a little money. But when the digital copy for the battle tomes are only $20 a pop, it's not hard to spend a little money on it. Especially if you're going to an event and you want to try, and there's a possibility you might be facing this army. do some research into the army, see what they might be playing, see what kind of combinations they'll be putting together, or what their allies may be, what you believe you might even take in that scenario if you were taking that list or that army. But yeah, I'd say that's like pretty much like the biggest rule I can tell for everybody. Obviously, you want to read up the FAQs because they're getting really good with those. Just know the rules. That's the best thing anybody can I guess tell you to do for any event really. Is just know your rules as well as your opponent's rules.
Yeah, that's very good advice, and look, I definitely repeat that advice that people should read the FAQs and know them. There's, thanks to the GW release schedule of those, they're reasonably long now, and they make quite a bit of difference for Tzeentch, KO in particular, both with extensive rules which impact the dynamic of how those armies play. Think about the changeling changes in the FAQ. And of course, all the ones that we know about for KO. But so definitely worth reading those and knowing them.
Another thing is don't ever go into a game letting your opponent get in your head or his army. Sometimes you can feel intimidated by the army. I mean, yeah, you may feel it's the absolute worst matchup army-wise, but who's to know that they may not slip up at some point, or they may not play the mission right, you know? Maybe they don't know their rules. Maybe they got overconfident, or even the dice bite them in the butt. But in Age of Sigmar,
don't defeat yourself.
Yeah. In Age of Sigmar, I've only ever, um, actually, no, I've never forfeited a game. I called one early because we actually like played it out to see what would happen. Like, you know, we actually, I think it was turn 4. Yeah, it was like turn 4, and it's like, okay, if you win this priority roll, you're going to do this and this, and then kill these units and take the objectives and win the game. How about we just do the priority roll, and if you cast this spell successfully, we'll just call it there. It's like, okay. Because, yeah, that was actually I love to give my buddy Elric a bunch of crap for this, but I've only ever actually lost one game of Age of Sigmar, playing it so far. And that was to playing my buddy James, and I was playing I wanted to just try it out. I was playing a very fluffy, you could say very fluffy, Vanguard Chamber army with like Paladors and everything. I just wanted, because I hadn't played with the stuff yet, so I wanted to try it all out just to have fun with it. And he was playing Change Host, and yeah, it came down to I was pretty happy with the fact that it came down to a priority roll on turn 5. That it came down to the last roll for priority to see if I would win or he'd win. I was pretty happy with that end result, but still I was just like, well, you can't win them all, I guess.
I think you do fairly well to stay that far in it with Paladors against Change Host.
Oh yeah, I was running 6 Paladors. Was it 6? Yeah, I was running 6 Paladors in a single unit, trying to like run them as kind of like almost like a Fulminator style, but just like hammer. I was giving them buffs and everything. I just wanted to have fun with them as much as I could, like blessed weapons, Castellant. Problem is they don't run well against Change Host because they get by all that stuff.
One of my mates, Sean, has done quite well with units of 6 Paladors, buffed up and moving them, taking full advantage of movement and making sure that you're applying that force where you need it to. Sort of getting towards the end of the show and rounding out the last couple of questions, something that I've asked everybody who's come on the Masterclass shows is there a unit, battalion or combo that you think's a hidden gem, or something which doesn't really get used much but is underrated by people? Is there anything that you can think of?
For Stormcast?
Right, any army.
Or just in general? I'll go because obviously Stormcast my jam. I'll say at least for them, I believe Black Talon Shadowhammers are. I think they are a true gem, a diamond in the rough, as far as I'm concerned. I think they take a lot of finesse and a lot of patience with that army. They can be a little fragile, but I think they can definitely do a lot of damage if done properly. The fact that Neve can just become a beatstick would be absolutely hilarious. It's like just walk up to a fully full of wounds, Lord Change, and try to lick him up and just chop him down to bits. Because if you can like bless her and then give her maybe like +1, like say Damned, or even the Castellet buff as well, or sorry, Celestant buff, generating additional hits on 3s and 4s would be pretty hot. And doing 2 damage per shot with 7 attacks, I mean, potentially you could do 21 hits. I'm not saying you will, but you could. And they're all doing 2 damage a pop. So just totally rend down a Lord Change. Or heck, even maybe some kind of Sylvaneth, chop at them with their axes. Show what kind of true assassin she really is. I think
that's a really good choice.
Plague Touched.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Is it the Plague Touch Warband in Chaos for the Everchosen one?
Yeah, it's the single drop.
That one's
Maggotkin army.
Definitely a steal. 100 points for that thing, and it adds. I mean, -1 to hit for your entire army because outside maybe if you take a Great Unclean one, because why not? They're amazing. Or Rodigus. Rodigus, I hate you. But if he had a range, I wouldn't have a problem. But the fact that it's just like, I see you, you just die. He's like the ultimate sniper in the game right now. But yeah, the -1 to hit your entire army in combat is pretty tough. On top of the fact that if you do too much to wound them, you can hurt yourself.
Yeah.
Just like if you wound them on 6s, you cause mortal wounds to yourself. So just like, all right, so not only are you harder to hit, but I'm damaging myself while I do it. Okay. And the durability on top of Nurgle is just crazy. So I think that one's definitely a great one.
You're not losing anything by running. You're not losing much by running units of 14 Chaos Knights, for instance, to pay 15.
Oh yeah, right. It's like you lose one model, or it's two models in a unit of Chaos Warriors if you're running a 30-man. It's like, oh darn, 28. Shucks. Yeah, I think the payoff's pretty good for that one. But that one's definitely I don't know if it's a hidden gem, but I think it's definitely a strong one that I haven't seen a lot of. I've seen some people play it. Don't get me wrong. Trying to think of anybody else. I mean, actually, I mean, I think Tempest Eye now with the Lord Ordinator could be really, really good. Because the Tempest Eye is the one where you have like KO, the Collegiate Arcane, obviously Stormcast. I think you can have a couple others in there too. The Ironworld Arsenal, but you can have an Ironclad on turn 1, potentially having a 2-up save, hitting on 2s, shooting at something twice a turn.
Yeah,
I think that could be pretty cool. I mean, getting +1 to hit from your Lord Ordinator, or possibly the Hurricanum or Damned Terrain, can just be pretty darn cool. And you get +1 save on the turn 1 with that. That just the Legions, obviously, it's not a battalion, but the Legions, you get +1 save on turn 1, and then everything's faster. 4 inches for flyers and 2 inches for everything else is pretty good. Speed's always a big part of the game, as far as I'm concerned, at least.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think
any other battalions?
I was just going to say, no, that's all good. I was just, I dug up the Tempest Eye Allegiance abilities to see what options there were, and it was Stormcast Eternals, Free Peoples, the Overlords, Swifthawk Agents and Eldritch Council. Your choices. So you can see some nice mixes of Stormcast, some Overlords, maybe some Free Guild Archers, for some cheap chaff and pre-game movement shenanigans.
Right.
No, there's lots of options in there. Cool. Well, thank you very much for coming on. There's certainly been a lot of useful tips and info in there, I think, especially for Stormcast players. If people want to sort of find you on the internet or follow you on Twitter and things, where will people find you?
You can message me on Facebook Messenger. Just Andrew Standiferd. Just hit me up, send me a message. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Lately, I've been a little busy, especially with Adepticon coming up, but also just a lot of real life stuff going on. And especially with work being a little hectic at the moment. But and then I'm at awesome103 on Twitter, but the one is spelt out ONE instead of. I know it just sounds difficult whenever I tell anybody because they always try and just do the numbers. And it's like, yeah, I didn't really think that out.
I'll put it in the show notes so there'll be no confusion. But no, thank you very much for coming on, and all the best of luck for Adepticon. It'll be really interesting to see what the lists are like and how the event plays out. I've been talking to Alex about getting copies of the lists at the end of the weekend. And seeing what's out there. So I'll have those up on the site.
I'm definitely looking forward to hoping to play against some of the people across the pond, or just even get to hang out with them would be cool. I'm actually going in the doubles with my buddy Miles. I think that'll probably be my highlight of the weekend, just the doubles of it.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it'll be great, and there's definitely a strong British invasion this year.
Yeah, that's what I've been told. So looking forward to seeing all those guys come across and just maybe even get to hang out and just BS a little bit would be nice. But yeah, me and my buddy Alric flying over there on Thursday. So definitely, and not this Thursday, but next Thursday. I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Yeah, well, all the best for that, and hopefully we get some more Deepkin news in the GW studio previews and things.
Fishmen!
Yeah.
Fish elves.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to that. Cool.
For sure.
Much. Thanks a lot. Been great having you on.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Cheers. All the best.
Cheers.